Hello, I'm Joey Sapp, a lawyer, scholar, hypnotist, therapist, and writer. This is an in-depth review, analysis, and critique of one of my books. I write on the law, magic, hypnotism, and policy. Enjoy.
All right, let's dive into this deep dive on the 12 principles of spiritual growth. With all these study guides, excerpts, and even that book you sent, it seems like you're really getting into this stuff. I gotta say, I think these principles, they're usually talked about with 12-step programs, but they can help anyone become a better version of themselves, even if you aren't in recovery.
Yeah, totally. It's like they're this framework to figure out who we are and how we can grow.
Exactly. So today we're going deep on honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, forgiveness, atonement, discipline, awareness, and love. It's quite a list. And you've got some really interesting questions about all of this. I think we're going to find some fascinating stuff as we go.
I think so too. Like honesty, for example.
Yeah.
It might seem simple at first glance.
Right, like just don't lie.
Well, yeah, but there's way more to it than that. The Principles Behind the Steps by Joseph Sapp. That book really opened my eyes to this. He talks about this thing called cash register honesty, which is super interesting.
Okay, you've got me curious. What's cash register honesty?
It's like that surface level honesty, the kind we use so we don't have to really look at ourselves too closely. Like, yeah, sure, I'll give you the right change, but don't ask me to balance the whole drawer kind of thing.
Yeah.
We might be honest in our everyday stuff, but then we avoid the hard work, like looking at our reasons, our fears, and all the shadow stuff inside.
Wow, that's a spot-on analogy. It's like we're scared to really take a good look at ourselves, so we just, glance at the surface. And those study guides you sent, they all say that being honest with ourselves is like the foundation of any real growth. Why is that? What makes honesty so important?
Well, think about it. If we aren't honest about who we are, about what we're struggling with, how can we even start to change? It's like building a house on sand. It's unstable. Real change can only begin when we shine a light on the stuff we'd rather hide. You know what I mean?
That makes total sense. It's like honesty makes room for hope to grow. And speaking of hope, both Sapp and the study guide say it kind of naturally comes from honesty. But hope can be kind of tricky, right? Is it just wishful thinking or is it more than that?
You hit the nail on the head. I think it's all about telling the difference between blind optimism and grounded hope. Blind optimism is just saying everything's going to be fine without actually facing the problems or doing anything to fix them. It's just sitting back and hoping.
But grounded hope is more like, okay, things are rough right now, but I believe they can get better and I'm going to do my part to make it happen.
Exactly. It's active. It comes from believing that things can change and being willing to put in the work.
So honesty lays the groundwork and hope is the seed that grows from it. And this is where it gets really interesting. Faith comes in. Sapp says that faith isn't always about religion. It's about believing in something bigger than yourself.
Totally. Think about you as a writer. Sometimes you don't know exactly how a story will end, but you have faith in the process and your ability to figure it out eventually.
That's so true. I gotta trust the process, even when I feel lost.
And that trust, that belief in something beyond your control, that's what Sapp is talking about. It's not blind faith. It's about having confidence in what you don't know, in the possibility of things working out, even when you can't see the whole path ahead.
And the study guide connects faith to courage, saying that faith helps us take action and makes us stronger to be courageous. So what does real courage look like then?
Well, Sapp makes a difference between courage and bravery, which I found really helpful. Bravery, he says, is often about what you do for others, like doing something heroic for someone else, even if you put yourself at risk.
So courage is more internal.
Exactly. It's about doing what's right by your values and who you truly are, even when you're scared. Let me put it this way. Bravery might be running into a fire to save someone, but courage might be leaving a bad relationship, even though it terrifies you.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So courage is about acting for yourself, for your own good and growth, even when it's scary.
Exactly. And that's where faith comes in. It gives us the strength to face our fears and do what aligns with our deepest values, even when it's tough.
Sapp said something else that stuck with me. He talked about being afraid of courage, but then realizing that physically, courage feels just like fear. Your heart races, your palms sweat. It's the same thing.
Isn't that wild? It makes courage seem less mysterious. It's not about having no fear. It's about acting despite the fear.
It's like those feelings, they don't have to stop us. Maybe they can even be a sign that we're on the right path, that we're about to do something important.
And realizing that is powerful. It makes courage feel like something we can all learn and grow into.
There's this great quote from James Baldwin in Sapp's book. Whatever we lose, even our lives, goes into the darkness forever. Whatever we save, including our lives, goes into light forever.
That's so powerful. It shows how courageous actions have a lasting impact, even if we don't get the results we wanted.
It's like even if we don't succeed, just being courageous makes a difference in the world, you know? It has a ripple effect.
And that brings us perfectly to the next principle, integrity. Because doing what's right, even when it's hard, that's one of the most courageous things we can do.
So how does Sapp define integrity?
He says it's about sticking to your principles even when it's easy to give in. It's about making your actions match your values, even when it's hard or inconvenient.
And he talks about being willing to change behaviors that aren't honest.
Right, because integrity isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest about where we mess up and being willing to change to line up with our values.
And the study guide connects integrity to peace of mind, just like courage. It's like when we're living with integrity, there's less fighting within ourselves, less of a gap between who we want to be and how we're acting.
Totally. It's about that match between our inner world and what we do out in the world. That feeling of wholeness brings a deep sense of peace.
It's like being true to ourselves. Okay, so we've got honesty leading to hope, hope fueling courage, and courage expressed through integrity. But how do we actually take those courageous steps?
That's where willingness comes in. Sapp doesn't mess around here. He says, you can't get better if you're not willing to change old behaviors.
It sounds so basic, but it's so true. We can have all the knowledge and good intentions we want, but if we aren't willing to actually change what we do, nothing really changes.
That's where things get tough. Because change, even good change, can be scary. It means letting go of the familiar, even if it's not good for us, and stepping into the unknown.
And that's where the study guide's point about letting go of our past selves comes in. It's like saying goodbye to the person we used to be, the one who made those mistakes, so we can embrace who we're becoming.
It's like shedding old skin to grow new skin. And that takes a ton of willingness and courage.
And I'm getting the feeling this is where humility might be helpful.
You're right on the money. Sapp says humility isn't about putting yourself down or feeling ashamed. It's about being right-sized, as he calls it. It's about knowing your limits, when to ask for help, and when to step back and let someone else take the lead.
He's really clear about the difference between humility and humiliation.
Exactly. Humility is about seeing yourself realistically, with all your strengths and weaknesses. It's about knowing you don't have all the answers and being open to learning from others.
Like being a student of life, always open to new things and different ways of seeing things. And the study guides say humility is super important for both forgiveness and self-awareness, which we'll get into later. But I'm already seeing how all these principles are connected, like puzzle pieces fitting together.
They really are. And as we explore more, I think you'll see even more clearly how they build on each other and support each other. Each one sets the stage for the next one, guiding us further along on this journey of growth.
Okay, so we've covered honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, and willingness. My brain is already feeling full. But there's still so much to talk about. Are we ready to dive into humility next?
Let's do it. But let's take a second to let these first 6 principles really sink in. What's standing out to you so far? What really resonates?
Honestly, what's hitting me the most is how much it emphasizes self-awareness. That we have to be totally honest with ourselves, even about the stuff we'd rather hide. And that honesty opens the door for hope and courage to grow. It's like this domino effect of good change, you know?
Love that domino effect of good change. And that's a perfect lead into humility. Because true humility means acknowledging both our strengths and our weaknesses, seeing ourselves as we truly are, no masks or pretending.
All right, let's get into humility. It seems so important, especially in a world that often pushes ego and showing off, you know?
You're right. It can feel weird to embrace humility these days. But we'll see that it actually gives you incredible strength and freedom. But, going back to what we were just talking about with humility, it's kind of wild how important it is for forgiveness, which is where we're headed next.
Right. It's like you need a good dose of humility to even be able to forgive yourself and other people.
Exactly. If you're holding on to feeling superior or like you're always right, it's almost impossible to be understanding and give grace.
Because we're too busy judging everyone.
Yeah, exactly. But when you come at forgiveness with humility, recognizing that we all have flaws and make mistakes, then it's so much easier to let go of that resentment and have some compassion.
Sapp has this really awesome quote about forgiveness that nails it. He says, when we forgive, we're not just forgiving the other person, we're forgiving ourselves.
Whoa, that's powerful. It shows how forgiveness is connected, how it's not just about the other person, it's about freeing ourselves from all that anger and bitterness.
It's like if you hold on to anger, it just hurts you in the end. It's like that saying, drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Perfect analogy. Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about choosing to let go of all that negative energy.
And both Sapp's book and the study guides, they all say forgiveness is self-care. Like realizing that holding on to anger and resentment, it just eats away at you.
It's like carrying around this heavy weight. It weighs you down emotionally, mentally, even physically. Forgiveness is like putting that weight down so you can move forward and feel lighter.
You know, this reminds me of that scorpion and frog story Sapp tells.
Oh, yeah. That classic story always makes you think.
You mind if we quickly go over it for our listener, just so we're all on the same page?
Sure thing. So the story goes like this. There's a scorpion, and he asks this frog to carry him across a river. The scorpion promises he won't sting the frog. The frog is like, okay, even though he's a little unsure. But then, halfway across, the scorpion stings him. They both end up dying. And when the frog asks why, the scorpion just says, it's in my nature.
It's such a simple story, but it really gets to you. And Sapp uses it to talk about forgiveness, right?
Exactly. He's saying that trusting and forgiving always has a risk. There's always that chance you'll get hurt again. But he also says that forgiveness isn't about being naive and ignoring that risk. It's about choosing to show compassion, even though there's a chance you might get betrayed.
It's like knowing that sometimes people, like scorpions, they just do things that hurt us, but you choose to forgive anyway. You're trying to stop that cycle of pain and resentment, even if it means taking a chance on trusting again.
And it's important to remember, forgiveness doesn't always mean getting back together with a person. You can forgive someone without saying what they did was okay or letting them back in your life. It's about letting go of the bad feelings, not giving them a free pass.
That's a really important point. It's about setting boundaries while still choosing to let go of the resentment.
Exactly. And that act of letting go, choosing to be kind instead of bitter, that's what ultimately sets you free.
It's like choosing to heal instead of letting the wound get infected, you know? Okay, so we've talked about forgiveness, but what about atonement? How does that fit in with spiritual growth?
Atonement is all about making things right after you've done something wrong. Taking responsibility for your actions and trying to fix things. Sapp says it really well. It's not about who you are or what you've done. It's about who you're going to become.
I love that. It's not about dwelling on your mistakes. It's about actively creating a better future.
And the study guides say that even if you can't make amends to the person you hurt directly, you can pay it forward by doing good things for others. You're restoring balance, even if it's in a roundabout way.
That's such a hopeful idea. Even if you made big mistakes in the past, you can still have a good impact now and in the future.
It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences, and we have a responsibility to try to make up for any harm we caused, even if we can't erase it completely.
You know, thinking about your own life, have there been times when you felt like you needed to make things right? What was that like for you?
That's kind of personal, but I think it fits with what we're talking about. Yeah, there have definitely been times when I regretted things I did and really wanted to make them right. In those times, I found that humility is key. It's about admitting you messed up without making excuses, and then sincerely trying to fix things. Maybe that's an apology, or changing your behavior, or just committing to doing better in the future.
Sounds like it takes a lot of looking inward and being willing to be vulnerable.
It totally does.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, but I think it's a big part of growing and healing.
And Sapp says even if there's no way to make amends to the person directly, doing good things for others can bring a sense of balance. It's like you're taking that regret and turning it into positive action, creating good vibes that spread outward.
I like that image, good vibes spreading outward.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even little actions can make a big difference.
Okay, so we've explored honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, forgiveness, and atonement. Wow, we're getting through these 12 principles, and I'm seeing how they're all connected, like threads woven together to make this tapestry of spiritual growth.
They really are. And as we move into the next one, discipline, you'll see even more how it builds on everything we've talked about so far.
All right, let's get disciplined. That word sometimes has a negative feel, like it's all about restriction and punishment. But I think Sapp and the study guides might have a different take on it.
You're right. Discipline, when you're talking about spiritual growth, it's often misunderstood. It's not about forcing yourself to do things you hate or not letting yourself enjoy things. It's about learning to master yourself, making your actions match your values, and getting strong enough to resist things that might lead you down the wrong path.
It's like choosing the better path, even when it's harder.
Exactly. And Sapp and the study guides both say that discipline comes from doing that deep personal inventory we talked about before. Admitting your faults and really understanding your mistakes.
So it's like you need to honestly assess yourself first. Got to figure out where you tend to go wrong before you can learn the discipline to stay on track.
And they all seem to agree that when you reflect like that, admit your faults and understand your mistakes, it makes you more aware of the things you've done wrong.
It's like shining a light on those blind spots, the places where we're kind of on autopilot and not really thinking about the consequences.
Yes. And that awareness, that ability to see yourself clearly, that's key for building discipline. Because how can you change your behavior if you don't even know what needs changing?
It's like awareness makes space for change to happen, gives you the chance to make different choices.
And something that stood out to me about how Sapp talks about discipline is that he sees it as self-care, not punishment.
Yeah, that's interesting. How so?
Well, he says that by developing discipline, you're basically taking care of your future self. You're making choices now that will benefit you later, even if they're hard or require sacrifice in the moment.
So it's like investing in your own well-being, building a solid base for a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. And thinking of discipline as self-care is really empowering. It takes away that feeling of obligation and replaces it with purpose and control.
So it's not about denying yourself joy or beating yourself up for mistakes. It's about consciously making choices that support your values and help you grow.
Absolutely. And I think that perfectly sets up the next principle, awareness. The more discipline you have, the more in tune you become with your own thoughts, feelings, and actions. You get better at self-awareness.
It's like discipline clears the mental clutter, so you can see things more clearly, both inside yourself and in the world around you.
And Sapp even says that self-awareness is what sets successful people apart from those who struggle.
He's got a point. Self-awareness helps us make good choices, understand why we do things, and change course when we get to. Without it, we're just reacting to everything without thinking.
And the study guides take this even further, talking about spiritual awareness, understanding yourself, others, and your place in the bigger scheme of things.
It's like expanding your consciousness, seeing the bigger picture, how everything's connected.
And Sapp actually gives some practical advice on how to cultivate that awareness. Meditation, contemplation, prayer, all things that help you connect to something bigger than yourself.
Like training your mind to be more present, more mindful, more aware of how amazing life is right here and now.
Exactly. And from that expanded awareness, that deeper understanding of ourselves and how we're all connected, that's where the final principle emerges. Love.
Okay, we made it to love. And I gotta admit, I'm a little intimidated by this one. It feels so big, so all-encompassing.
I hear ya. Love is a word we use all the time, but its real meaning can be hard to pin down. I think Sapp has a helpful perspective, though. He says love is a verb. And then he says, true love is always trying to do something for someone else.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like he's saying love isn't just a feeling, it's something you do. It's how you live in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the study guides agree, saying that love is expressed through actions, through being of service to others. It's about going beyond just thinking about yourself and showing kindness, compassion, and generosity to others, even when it's hard.
It's like love is a force that goes outward, connecting us to something bigger than ourselves.
You know what else Sapp says that's interesting? He says, hate is not the opposite of love, apathy is.
That's a new thought. Never thought of it like that. But it makes sense. Hate, even though it's destructive, it still comes from a place of caring, even if it's twisted. Apathy, that's just indifference. It's the lack of feeling, of connection.
Exactly. And Sapp says hate often comes from pride and wanting more than others, while love focuses on other people's well-being. It's about moving from a scarcity mindset, like there's not enough to go around, to one of abundance, realizing there's enough for everyone.
It's like moving from ego to heart, and that's what these 12 principles are all about. It's a journey to discover yourself, to change and grow, to become more authentic and compassionate, and have a more fulfilling life.
It's a journey worth taking, one that has the power to change not only your own life, but the world around you too.
So we did it. We explored all 12 principles. I'm feeling really inspired, but gotta say, it's a lot to take in. How do we even start to apply all this to our lives?
Great question. One that I think we'll keep asking ourselves even after this deep dive is over. But the most important thing is to remember, it's a journey, not a destination. No need to try to master everything all at once.
It's about taking it one step at a time, focusing on the principles that resonate most with you right now, and trusting that the rest will come in time.
And remember, these principles are all connected. They build on each other and support each other. So even when you focus on one, you're naturally strengthening the others too.
It's like a spiral staircase, taking us up to a more enlightened way of being.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's a constant upward journey. As we wrap up this look at the 12 principles, it really hits me how much deeper our understanding gets when we see them not just as separate ideas, but as part of this whole bigger picture of growth.
It's true, it's like each principle is a piece of thread, and when you weave them together, they make this beautiful, intricate design.
Right. And what's so cool is how practical they are. It's not just some vague spiritual stuff. It's about how we actually live our lives.
Exactly. And speaking of practical, Sapp's book is packed with real-life stories that really bring these principles to life.
Remember that story he told about being scared of courage? And then realizing that physically, courage feels the same as fear.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge aha moment for me.
Uh,
It made courage seem so much more attainable, like something we can all work towards even when we're scared.
It's about realizing that courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what's right by your values, even though you're afraid.
It's like turning that nervous energy into fuel, using it to push you forward.
And that applies to so many of these principles, right? It's not about reaching some perfect state of being. It's about embracing the messiness of being human and using it to grow.
It's about remembering that we're all works in progress, always changing, always learning, always trying to be better.
And that effort, that commitment to growth, that's what makes life meaningful.
Yeah.
It gives us purpose, direction, and a feeling of fulfillment.
As we were talking about all this, I kept coming back to the idea of forgiveness as self-care.
Yeah, it's such a powerful way to look at it, right? It's not just about letting go of resentment for the other person. It's about realizing how much holding on to anger hurts us.
It's like giving yourself permission to heal, to let go of the negativity and move forward with more ease and peace.
And I think that connects really well with atonement, which is about owning your actions and trying to make things right.
It's about understanding that we all make mistakes, but that doesn't define us. We can always choose to learn from what happened and make amends to ourselves and others.
And even if you can't make amends directly to the person you hurt, you can always pay it forward by doing good things for others, spreading kindness and compassion outwards.
It's like turning regret into positive action, trying to make the world a little brighter, a little kinder, a little more loving.
That's the heart of spiritual growth, I think.
Yeah.
It's not just about changing ourselves. It's about helping everyone be better.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into these 12 principles, I want to leave you with one last thought, something to think about as you keep going on your own journey of growth.
I'm listening.
We talked about how forgiveness is self-care, right? It's about letting go of resentment and anger so we can move on. But what if we took that a step further? What if we thought about forgiveness as being about who the other person is going to become? Like, what if extending forgiveness is also an act of faith in their potential to grow?
Wow, that's deep. It's not just about releasing your own pain. It's about believing that the other person can change for the better. It's seeing that they're on a journey too, and that forgiveness might help them grow.
And maybe, just maybe, that kind of forgiveness, that belief in someone else, can inspire them to be better than they were before. It's like this ripple effect of compassion.
What a powerful idea. It takes forgiveness beyond just helping yourself and turns it into a force for change in our relationships and the world.
That's definitely something to think about.
It really is. It reminds us that even when we've been hurt or disappointed, we can always choose to be kind and understanding.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But I promise you, there's so much more to uncover with these 12 principles. They're a treasure trove of wisdom and guidance for anyone on the path of personal growth.
And don't forget, this journey never really ends. There's always more to learn, more to discover, more to become.
So keep exploring, keep learning, keep striving to be the best version of yourself. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. If you want to get a copy of the book discussed, the link is below. Please like, subscribe, and share. It means a lot to us and isn't that hard for you.